Well, I want to welcome you. You are in the home of the Georgia Association of Water Professionals, and I know not everybody's been here before, so I just want to say welcome. My name is Pam Burnett. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the association, and we'll tell you more about us in a little bit. We do have our little commercial, of course, but we're just very happy you're here. This is the 2013 Regional Water Education Symposium, and there's 4 of these around the region that are being held. One was earlier in the week out in Gwinnett County, and that was a really nice experience for everybody. Very similar. There's a few different water professionals on each of the panels, so you'll hear a little more of a regional flavor at each one if you attend more than one, and you're very welcome to do that. But here at the Georgia Association of Water Professionals, this is the Northwest Quadrant. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. This symposium is primarily for the elected officials, but we really want everybody to participate, ask all the questions you can. You're here with experts in the water profession. And I do want to point out, you have one handout. Well, you have 2 handouts. You have an agenda, and you have this. That's a map. I think it's a great little handout, and if you do nothing else but fold this up and put it in your pocket today, what you'll have is a point of reference for all the water issues, but you'll also have a couple of little points on the back, and you'll have resources you can call. If you find yourself being asked a question that you can't answer, or you don't want to answer, or you're curious about, go to the folks on the back of this page, and we will answer the question, or we'll find somebody who can. So, with that, I want to introduce for you to, well, actually, what I really want to do is introduce each other. So if you don't mind, we're going to take a few minutes so you all know who's in the room today, and just say who you are and who you're representing. We'll do that very quickly, and then we're going to hear a little bit more of an introduction from our panelists. And I'm going to start with my boss, who's the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Water Professionals.
Good morning, I'm Jack Dozier, and I'm her boss. I'm the, she tells me what to do, but I'm her boss, I guess. But I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Water Professionals. I'd like to add my welcome to you and encourage you to take a tour if you have time today. What most people leave from here is, how in the heck did y'all get fountain drinks in the break room? And y'all are welcome to those. And I would also like to ask just everybody to turn your cell phone off or on vibrate, if you would. And if you get a call, please don't answer it in here. We can hear you. So if you get a call, take it outside the room, please. But thanks again. We really welcome you, and I'll tell you a little bit more about GAWP in just a few minutes.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Zitch. I am the Director of the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District and also the Manager of the Natural Resources Division at Atlanta Regional Commission.
Hi, I'm Danny Johnson with the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District, and pass it along.
Good morning, I'm Scott Haggard. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for the Atlanta Regional Commission.
I'm Ben Young, Publisher and Editor-in-Chief of Georgia Trend Magazine.
I'm Joel Peacock, Director of Operations here at GWP. Welcome.
I'm Patrice Williams with the City of Douglasville.
Tim Perkins for South County Water and Sewer. Barry Lucas for South County Water and Sewer.
Tim Jarrell, Vice President, Power Supply, Cobb EMC.
I'm Kevin Chambers with Georgia EPD.
Drew Ferguson, I'm representing Congressman Tom Graves.
Don Barber, Regional Director of External Affairs for AT&T, and also Paulding County Chamber Chairman this year.
Doris Devey, Mayor of the City of Hiram.
I'm Boyd Austin, Mayor of the City of Dallas and Chair of the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District.
Greg Ramsey from the City of Powder Springs.
I'm Mike Jones. I'm the County Administrator for Paulding County.
I'm Michael Carter, Paulding Water.
David Barnett, Post 4 Commissioner of Paulding County.
Jack Kapp, I'm the Chief of Georgia EPD's Watershed Protection Branch.
I'm Brandon Reese with Wellstar Hospital System. My wife asked me this morning why I was going to a water meeting. I said, we do a lot of hand washing.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joanne Burrow, District 3, Cobb County Commissioner, serve the Northeast Cobb area, and I'd just like to welcome you all to Cobb County.
I'm Kathy Wynn with Cobb County Water.
I'm Mike Ross with the Ross Consulting Engineers, and I'm also Cherokee County's representative to the Regional Business Coalition.
Tom Hurd, Cherokee Water Authority.
Good morning. I'm Kimberly Alexander. I'm the state representative for District 66, which encompasses Paulding County and Douglas County. Glad to be here.
Good morning. I'm Farrell Bridges. I'm Representative Alexander's legislative assistant. Basically, she told me to wake up this morning, come with her, take some notes. That's what I'm here for. Nice to meet everybody.
Good morning. My name is Pete Frost, and I'm with the Douglas County Water and Sewer Authority.
Good morning. I'm Glenn Page. I'm with Cobb County Marietta Water Authority.
Good morning. I'm Russ Pennington. I am the Director of Policy and Public Affairs for the Georgia Environmental Protection Division.
And I'm going to pass this over to our fearless leader back here, just to say hello to you.
Steve Cannon, Gwinnett Environmental Heritage Center.
And I'm Terry Lawley, the Executive Director of the Regional Business Coalition of Metropolitan Atlanta, and welcome everyone this morning.
We are so glad you're here, and thanks for waking up early. And if you're just here to take notes, that's okay too, but you're going to learn a lot about water, and now you know who to talk to when you have a question come up. We couldn't do this without sponsors, so let me tell you a little bit about our sponsors. We do have platinum sponsors. They're UGA's College of Environment and Design, AT&T, thank you, Don, the Gwinnett Environment and Heritage Center, that's Steve, and the Regional Business Coalition of Metro Atlanta. And our gold sponsors are Patillo Industrial Real Estate, Noonan Utilities, Georgia's EMCs, the Georgia Association of Water Professionals, and the Metro North Georgia Water Planning District. And I think we met individuals from each one of those organizations. So now without further ado, I would like to introduce Mayor Boyd Austin. He is going to give us a perspective. He's the mayor of Dallas, as he told you, and he's also the chairman of the Metro North Georgia Water Planning District, and he is probably a spiritual figure as well in the water world here in Metro Atlanta. So we welcome you. We're going to hear a little perspective from Boyd about the water situation in Metro Atlanta.
Thank you, Pam. I don't think I've ever been called a spiritual figure before, so I don't know what that portends. This printout you have is one of my favorite pieces of information, and we kind of tweak it over time to add to it. If you don't have one, I think there's some at these other tables, so we can certainly get you one. But it gives the vital information on what the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District is and what we do. You can see that we encompass a 15-county region. We are established by law, and a law that was passed in 2002 was a result of the first statewide water study committee, which I served as the municipal representative as an appointee of Speaker Tom Murphy at the time. And I told him the other day in Gwinnett, we did great work. We came up with a lot of good ideas, and we had a terrible event. It rained. And everybody took their mind off the drought and off the need for water for a few years. And finally, we had another drought that came back, and it got people focused. And another drought cycle after that resulted in the creation of the other 10 water councils around the state. And now we've seen that those have a semi-permanence, and hopefully they'll be fully funded and operational as we have been. But our district has a great track record. We are 15 counties, 92 cities, 59 water providers, I think is the number of water providers in the district, representing 5 million people, over 5 million people. We've grown by 1 million people since we were founded, but we've cut water consumption on average by 20%. So we've got a great story to tell to talk about our conservation policies. But as we continue to grow, we know that we can't conserve our way or conserve our way into the future. We've got to have more storage facilities. We've got to ensure an adequate water supply. We've been through the court battles with Florida and Alabama. We fought the water wars for almost 30 years, between 25 and 30 years. That was finally settled last year when the Supreme Court upheld or refused to hear the appeal on the circuit court and tentatively upheld the decision that we could use Lake Lanier for water supply. And now we got the lovely intimation from the governor of Florida that he may sue Georgia directly. In the past, they've sued the Corps of Engineers over the operation of the lake. Now they're going to sue us over the water rights, and that will go directly to the Supreme Court to see if they will hear it. And if that starts, it's probably about a 10-year process. Starts with a special master and more money, more litigation, more time. So it is a very involved process. You see here that we have 6 river basins in the district. The 2 big federal reservoirs on the systems on the ACT is Lake Lanier, and the ACF is Lake Lanier, Apalachicola, Chattahoochee, Flint. And on the Alabama Coosa Tallapoosa, it's Lake Allatoona. The question was asked the other day about groundwater supply. You see that 99% of our water comes from surface waters. We don't have the underground structures. We don't sit on an aquifer like South Georgia does. It's a different geology. Some cities have wells. In Dallas, we have 3 that provides about 20 to 25% of our daily water use, but it's not a very viable alternative in the North Georgia geology. And then you see our big number, that the 20% reduction in water usage. All of this information is available on our website. We have great staff that keeps the information current, keeps compiling. And if you go and look, you'll find that we use a lot less water per capita in the Atlanta region than they do in Columbus, Georgia, or in Florida, or Alabama cities. We have really focused on conservation. For you local officials that are in the room, the county elected and city elected officials, our state representative, we have instituted a broad range of ordinances that have put both a financial burden and a fiscal constraint on the local governments. We have 3 sections: water supply, what do we call stormwater section is watershed management, and then the wastewater sections. All of us have to comply with district guidelines to have passed, substantially passed the district model ordinances, to comply with the EPD audit to get our permits renewed or to increase a permit. Some of that is lost in the fact that a lot of times it's cost us a lot of money. In Dallas, we've spent about $2 million on the legal fees to create the ordinances, to put them in place, to buy some of the equipment, to do the testing, the monitoring, and the engineering to get us to the point where we can get a new permit for a wastewater treatment plant. The other thing that came up the other day was talking about funding. Somebody talking about the state was going to fund the other water districts. Well, they give us a little bit of money, about, it's $250 a year, but it's how much a percentage of our budget? About 20%. The rest of it comes from us. Each county in the district and the city of Atlanta pays a per capita rate to the district, and that's the operational expenses. That rate goes up in years when we have to do a renewal or a plan update. We sometimes get additional funds from the state in that regard. But what I want you to understand is this isn't just some other organization, some group that's formed that's doing it. This is the local governments. The governing board is comprised of the commission chairs, permanent seats of counties over 200,000 in population. And those under, it switches back and forth between a mayor of a city that supplies water or the commission chair. So it's local elected officials and then citizen at large appointees that run the district. We have a great staff. Both Catherine and Danny are relatively new. They've had a lot thrown on them to begin with. Catherine did stop the drought, though, so we will give her credit for that. We had been in a drought for so long that all this water that we had, finally at our last meeting, was the first time I've been at a meeting that there was no red on the map in the state of Georgia. So that's good news. I talked about Florida suing us, and I want you to understand some of the import of that and some of the background of it. Anybody can tell me what Florida says we're destroying? Oysters. Oysters in the Apalachicola Bay. That production is about $6 million, with an M, $6 million a year in economic product. If you multiply it times a multiplier of 5, you get about $30 million. It is 0.0004% of the Florida GDP. It's a great sob story. You know, you can show a fisherman in a boat with nothing in it. But when you look back and you look in Georgia, and we're beginning to compile the numbers now, it affects the largest swath of our agriculture belt and our agritourism, the total agribusiness industry in Georgia. I have a feeling it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15% of Georgia's GDP, what's affected by water in that region. So we have a lot at stake. It is not just a metro problem. It is a Georgia problem. It is a regional problem. My idea is that we have got to bring everybody to the table. We've got to make Georgians realize that we should be united in this effort, just like the neighbors in Alabama and Florida have been united against us. A lot of it comes from education, of understanding that we use very little of the water that comes out of the Chattahoochee. If you look at this map and you put your finger about where it says Hall County, or the name Hall, if you just put your thumb over that end of the lake, that's the collection area for Lake Lanier. It's 5% of the land area of the state of Georgia. But Lake Lanier holds 65% of the storage for the entire ACF system. The Corps of Engineers is regulating this whole region all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, mainly out of Lake Lanier. Another story you don't get from Florida is back in the 50s, they decided that it was too expensive for the fishermen and for the tourists to have to go around St. George Island to get out into the Gulf. So they came in and they cut it in half. It's called Sykes Cut. That's where a lot of the salinity comes back into the bay. Last year we had a record drought. They were complaining there wasn't enough flow and that the oysters were dying because of that. This year they're complaining because there's too much water, and an article said a few weeks ago, we ought to build more reservoirs in Georgia to hold the water when it rains. Hallelujah. That's what we've been trying to tell them. It's a real complex issue, but it affects every one of us, whether you're an elected official, a business person, member of the Regional Business Coalition, the public at large. It's quality of life issues. It is, in my opinion, purely, or most importantly, economic between the states. And Governor Deal has said we ought to be able to negotiate rather than litigate. We've been through this process for a long time. We have prevailed in the past. I think it's time that we all look at it and move on, and hopefully those things will happen. This is a great program. We were in Gwinnett on Monday. If you've never been to the Gwinnett, I want to make sure I say it right, Environmental and Heritage Center, you should go there. You should see what they've done there to showcase the environmental aspects of their utilities as well as the heritage of their region. Anybody got any questions for me before I sit down? Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. I think you'll find it very informational, and I hope you'll ask questions if you have them.
And Mayor Austin, you're here the rest of the time, right? Thank you. Thank you so much. That was very helpful. Boyd has been the mayor in Dallas since 1996, and he serves on the boards of GMA. He's at GFA, and he's, as we say, leading the water district. So he's a very busy, very engaged individual, and we thank you for your leadership. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to ask the panelists to start moving to the front while I introduce Dr. John Calabria with the University of Georgia. He's in the College of Environment and Design. He teaches landscape architecture. He's going to be moderating our illustrious panel today, and his expertise is primarily on the stormwater side, doing water management in the environment. And so he's been part of several demonstration projects and community-based education for stormwater management. So I would like to turn the mic over. Actually, you have your own mic. Dr. John Calabria.
Great. Thank you all. Very kind, very kind. I just want to say a few words prior to introducing the panelists. We do landscape architecture over at the School of Environmental, or College of Environment and Design at the University of Georgia. We have several programs, and we look at water from a couple of different perspectives. We have our planning program, Masters in Environmental Planning and Design, and that's kind of the 30,000-foot view, and then we come down and work at the site level in our landscape architecture programs. And we have a pretty deep curriculum that's rooted in a lot of sustainability and a lot of water quality issues. So I try to look at things as opportunities and barriers, and I think there's been some interesting barriers presented to getting out of the women's locker or women's restroom, but we can't do water resources without looking at some of the opportunities and barriers, and we'll try to get into some of those and then address any questions that y'all might have as we go through. So I wanted to also share with you, I brought a few of these, and it's online, and I can certainly get more to you, but in 2009 and 10, we did a little survey, and this came out of the Carl Vincent Institute office, which is over at the University of Georgia. We asked about 500 or so people in Georgia, as a random sample, what were their thoughts? What are their perceptions? What are their attitudes about water quality? And you'll be relieved to know that people, thought it was very important. They understood that having clean water, clean groundwater is very important, and you wouldn't be surprised by that. Many people thought that their water quality was actually in pretty good shape. And of course, when we asked them when it wasn't in good shape, who did they blame? And of course, interestingly to us, industry had a big target on their head, but then the second runner-up was erosion, subdivision development, new road development, and then stormwater. And all these things are fairly important to folks. And then when it came to protecting water resources, we asked which level of government would be, who they had the most faith in, who they thought was, best at representing their interest. And largely, I'll have you know, that they had a very high level of confidence in their local government officials. So they were very excited that local governments could carry forward some of their concerns. Also, interestingly, they didn't think that the federal government was terrible, but just know they put more stock in the local government to get things done, which I thought was a pretty good indicator that there'd be opportunities to do that. And then while they enjoyed their water quality, many people were very concerned over the next 10 years, which the survey is done in 2010, so we're running out of time. But they were very concerned about meeting all their resources in the next 10 years. So I'm sure y'all live and breathe this every day. But I did want to share that with you. This was funded by the USDA and was part of a project that we did. And we'd love to do a follow-up project. So if anybody's got some deep pockets that they want to go fund this, we'd be happy to do that. So without further ado, I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves and maybe tell us a little bit about their area of expertise, some of the water issues we're working on. And then I have a couple of questions that I want to start with. And then certainly if you have questions, please raise your hand, and we'll be able to circulate a microphone to you and try to address some of the questions that you have. Obviously, this summit is more geared towards trying to understand what some of the local elected officials want to know and have questions about, so they might have a little bit of a priority on some of the questions, particularly as we start to run out of time, but we're very glad to hear from everybody on this. So what I'd like to do is start with Mr. Dozier, if you want to.
Good morning again. I'm Jack Dozier. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Water Professionals. We're an organization of some 4,000 individuals who are people that work with water and wastewater every day, people that run water and wastewater systems, all the way from the operators through the utility directors, consulting engineers, equipment representatives, attorneys, anybody that's involved in our business we hope is a member of our association. We've been in existence since 1932. I haven't been here that long, but I'm working on it. We are, by and large, your staff level people, the folks that work for the elected officials and run the water systems, whether we're the actual utility folks or the consultants or the other folks that work with the utilities. We also have, we represent industries. We have a number of industrial members. So anybody that's involved in the water business, we'd like to think is a member of our organization.
Hi, I'm Catherine Zitch, the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District. Our chairman so eloquently introduced and gave you background on. Other things that the Atlanta Regional Commission does, especially the Natural Resources Division, is we are intimately involved in all tri-state water war issues and have been representing through a legal and technical team the water managers, so the major users of the lake and the river throughout the lakes and the river throughout that dispute. My background, I'm an engineer. I went to Clemson. My undergrad is in civil, my master's is in environmental, and as Boyd mentioned, I started with ARC in January and it started raining in January.
Good morning. I'm Russ Pennington. As I said earlier, I am the Director of Policy and Public Affairs with Georgia EPD, which is a relatively new position that I assumed not just less than a year ago. I'm in the director's office, but my entire background and career has been in the water industry, as I was a consultant prior to coming to EPD, and have kind of worked all across the country from California to Colorado and Wyoming and all throughout the Southeast. It's my passion, and it's where I like to stay involved most in EPD, probably at some point to Jack Cap's. We work well together, but Jack is new to the water branch as well, and as we've gone through a lot of change within the organization, I think everything is looking up. EPD has 3 branches: land, air, and water, and obviously this falls right into the water branch, but water is probably the most glaring as far as the forefront for what EPD does. The governor has a specific interest in water and has developed the governor's water supply program to solve some of our water supply problems that the state has had over the years, and I think we'll talk about some of the issues at hand today.
Thanks, Russ. Again, I'm Glenn Page, General Manager of the Cobb County Marietta Water Authority. I, like Catherine, am very proud to say that I graduated from Clemson University, and then Georgia Tech with a master's. So I'm not a bulldog. I've been serving the great folks in Cobb and Paulding and parts of Cherokee and Douglas and Fulton for almost 26 years. The last 7 as general manager, and like Russ said, I'm passionate about water. It is my career, but it's also something that allows me to come to work every day with a smile on my face because I get to serve people, and that's just how God made me. He made me want to do that. So, a little bit about Cobb Marietta. We are the 2nd largest producer of drinking water in the state of Georgia. We serve about 875,000 people, but we only have 10 customers. We're a wholesaler only, which is very good from a customer relations standpoint because I only have 10 people that call me. We also are drinking water only, or as we prefer to call it, smooth water. And so we only have the regulatory side. We only deal with one of those Metro District plans and not all 3 of them. But we do work with our customers as regulations have changed. we're responsible more than just where the water hits our customer's boundary. Now we have regulations where we're responsible for water all the way to the tap. Yeah, that's complicated some things. That's on the federal side. We also, as my predecessor referred to us, we're the poster child for interbasin transfer. We have the ridge line between the ACF and ACT basins bisects Cobb County. Almost 50-50 on land area. And you're sitting very close to the ridge line today. Because of that, we have the distinction of being very involved in both sides of that litigation for the last 20 plus years. And we also have issues related to both Lake Lanier and even more so Allatoona Lake, because we have a contract with the Corps. And that's very complicated because the Corps has trouble defining how they manage their contracts. And as times have changed, the Corps hasn't changed very much with them, and that creates even more problems. But we'll get into that a little bit more. We also have built the Hickory Log Creek Reservoir in Canton. We're 75% owner in that project. That is the Hickory Log Creek project has the tallest dam in Georgia that's not owned by the Corps or by a power company. And we have had a lot of challenges with that, and I think we'll get into that as well.
Hi, I'm Tom Hurd. I'm the GM with Cherokee Water and Sewerage Authority. We are actually a little different from Glenn. We do both the lumpy and the smooth. My background, I'm a graduate of Southern Polytechnical Institute, and been in the water business now roughly almost 30 years. It don't seem like that long. I started with Forsyth, and I've been with Cherokee as a GM for the last quickly approaching 20 years now. We have grown since 1955. We are kind of a unique animal in the industry. We are a standalone utility. We're not affiliated with any of the local or state or federal governments in any way. Our revenues are purely from the sale of our services, along with connection fees for new connections. We never had a grant. We've never had a federal or state loan, and we've never had a sales tax dollar. So our customers pay their own way. As a result, since 1955, we've grown at a slower rate to begin with, but as growth comes, it's made us financially very strong. Something we're very proud of. We're rated the same as our local county government. We're AA plus rated by the rating agencies. We too have a reservoir. The one that Glenn has in our county is not ours. Ours is actually located in the edge of Dawson County. Ours has been operational since the late 90s. It's approximately the same size. It's a 38 MGD dam. First service is that. It's about 3.8 million gallons of water that we store. We presently have our water needs taken care of for the next 20 to 25 years. We're working now on capacity's been our big goal, as it is for the whole region. We're looking now for the next 20, 25 years. We're looking at options of potentially raising our dam. We've been involved a lot with trading of utilities, which we take industrial uses that are existing and able to take those and repurpose those. In the poultry industry mainly is what we've been able to do. We picked up sewer capacity by doing that and some water capacity as well. And we're working on some other new options with that for water and sewer in the future. Been very lucky in that regard and see that as a great positive. So capacity is not really an issue with us right now. However, we are a region, so we understand that as the region goes, we go. And so from that standpoint, we've tried to be involved throughout with others involved in getting future capacities needed. As we've said, as the mayor said to start with, I think one message to get out of this from our region is that we have did the hard work. Conservation has worked here. We conserved. We've pretty much beat that horse down now. There's not a lot more room for future conservation to yield a whole lot more. And that's a message that I think for the region needs to tell the nation as a whole, is not look at us as what we can do as far as conservation in the future. Look at what we've already done. We maintain that conservation. Going forward now, we're going to have to develop new resources. So with that, I'll shut up and pass it on.
Good morning. As I mentioned earlier, my name's Pete Frost. I'm the Executive Director for the Douglas County Water and Sewer Authority. We are an independent body that provides water services through all of Douglas County, including the city of Douglasville. We were formed in 1985, and I was their first employee. And the youngsters that just introduced themselves, I have been with that organization for 29 years, and I've been around the water industry for about 44 years. Yeah, I know. Luck of the draw, I guess. The one thing I would like to mention is that the Water and Sewer Authority, not only do we handle the water, we do handle wastewater, and I think we're the only agency here that actually addresses the stormwater issues as well. We have really taken a holistic approach in Douglas County to try and deal with the pollutant loads in our streams, and so probably one of the toughest tasks is dealing with stormwater. I can tell you I dealt with just water and wastewater for the first 20 years of my tenure, and for the last decade we have added stormwater to that menu, and I can tell you that I spend about 80% of my time dealing with stormwater problems. Most people don't realize this, that in the state of Georgia, the largest pollutant load getting into our streams today is from non-point sources, which is stormwater that runs across the street, your yard, your rooftop, and it is the most difficult to deal with. I'm not saying that anybody here has an easy job, but it's we all have issues in our areas, but it is definitely the most difficult to deal with because it flows in and out of one jurisdiction. It actually flows in and out of our areas of responsibility. You know, it flows across the public road. We're responsible for it. It flows across a private property. We don't own it. Then it shows back up in our system as well. So I would say that I think what you're going to see in the coming years, not only when we talk about the water wars, but you're going to be talking a lot more about stormwater and seeing how various agencies address that. I know there are a number of water utilities and stormwater utilities in Metro Atlanta. Ours has been in existence for about 10 years now, and Mayor Austin talked about the amount of money that they spent given district issues. I can tell you we spend about $4.5 to $5 million a year just on stormwater issues in Douglas County. And that revenue to deal with that does come from our ratepayers. So having said that, the one thing I would like you to take away from this meeting is that you know, what happens in one area of the region affects us all. You know, I see that I hear the discussions going on about the Hickory Log Creek Reservoir, and I've heard people in our community say, well, that's just, you know, that's Cobb County's problem. No, it does have an impact on us in Douglas County. What happens in Cherokee County can affect what happens in Douglas County. And so the one thing I really want you to take away is that the issues that get talked about today, excuse me, are really everybody's issues, and they will affect everybody. So that's what I have to add, and I guess I'll pass this back down to Jack.
Great. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate everybody telling us about your expertise, and it seems like we have a pretty deep bench when it comes to that. Got a couple tigers on it, but I think y'all will get over that. And out of confession, I have 2 degrees from Clemson, but boy, I was tore up when the Dogs didn't win. So I think I know where my allegiance is, but good times. I'm definitely feeling like I'm on the right side. So in any case, yeah, so what I want to do is run through a couple of prepared questions, and if you're timid about asking questions, certainly know that there are some index cards on the back table, and you can write some questions on that, and then we'll gather that. If not, raise your hand and we'll call on you and get a microphone to you. Be sure to write neat. I'd hate to have to take off a couple of points before I go back to Athens for that. So, in any case, what I want to do is just, remind you, that primarily we're trying to get, the focus on elected officials. They might have priority on some of the questions, but, we're excited that everybody's here. So we'll start first with Mr. Dozier, and as basically the question revolves around talking about the Clean Water Act from 1972, and maybe discuss a little bit about creation and passage, and how that has an impact on our 21st century water management, and then, importantly, how that the municipalities would manage their water resources in light of that.
Thank you. And I didn't really mention my background because during football season, I am used to just passing over it. I'm a graduate of Duke University. I have a bachelor's in civil and a master's in environmental engineering from Duke. And I bleed red and black during football season. Mayor Austin just gave me a thumbs up. So I can't apply for money though. Let's take a trip back about 40 years in history, if you would, and we'll talk a little bit about the Clean Water Act and how we got to where we are today. I think it's important to know where you've come from to know where you're going. 1970, roughly. We've just come through the 60s, a decade of turmoil, social unrest, new awareness. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring was written in 1962 and kind of sounded a warning shot on the environment. In the late 60s, we had fish kills all over the country. The Cuyahoga River was on fire, for crying out loud. We had gone through a decade of 3 major assassinations. There was a lot of unrest, and the environment started coming more and more to the forefront. In 1970, we had our first Earth Day, and I happened to be a sophomore at Duke at the time, and just finishing up my second year in civil engineering and thinking, what in the heck am I going to do with this for a career? And all of a sudden, our sanitary engineering department got renamed environmental engineering. And I said, aha, there's something that I can do, that I can make a living and actually enjoy what I'm doing and save the world at the same time. So environmental awareness was just becoming a reality. Senator Muskie had actually been working on the Clean Water Act amendments or on the Federal Clean Water Act. It was called Water Pollution Control Act back in 1972. But he'd been working on it for 4 or 5 years and just never got any impetus, never got any push for it, any traction, because there just wasn't that much interest in it. And all of a sudden, things like the Cuyahoga River catching on fire gave us visible reasons for taking on these challenges. In 1970, we passed the Clean Air Act. In 1972, passed the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, which is now the Clean Water Act. Georgia had actually had a program, as most states had. Georgia had enacted a Georgia Water Quality Control Act in 1964, and most of you won't recognize the name, but I still have a vision of Rock Howard, who was our original secretary of the Water Quality Control Board, charging into Savannah Harbor and taking on American Cyanamide, who was dumping titanium dioxide directly into, sulfuric acid, which is used to treat titanium to purify, to get all the mess off of it. And they shipped it down from Pennsylvania and then purified it in Savannah Harbor, in Savannah, and dumped sulfuric acid directly into the harbor. And Rock Howard, and then joined by Leonard Ledbetter, who's my personal mentor and hero in the environmental movement, took on folks like American Cyanamide and started the environmental movement in Georgia. So by the time the 1972 Act was passed, Georgia had already gotten most of the industries into compliance with some level of treatment, at least. In 65, we had 375 industries that were discharging with no treatment in the state of Georgia. And by 72, as a result of the efforts primarily of Mr. Howard and Mr. Ledbetter and a small team of folks, we had gotten up to most of those industries providing some level of treatment. But at that time, we still had about 200 municipal facilities that were discharging less than secondary treatment. We had about 25 or 30 municipalities that had no sewer systems. And that doesn't mean they have septic tanks. They had no sewer systems. So homes were basically discharging individually. We had another 40 or 50 that had sewer systems but no treatment whatsoever. So they were discharging raw sewage into creeks. And then another about 100 facilities that were providing some level of treatment, but very little level of treatment. So the first thing the Clean Water Act of 1972 did was it established a target of fishable, swimmable rivers, every navigable water in the country. And navigable waters meant basically if you could put a toy sailboat on it and it would float, it was considered navigable waters. But it established a target of every water being, all the nation's waters being at fishable, swimmable quality. And the goal was to restore and protect the physical, chemical, and biological integrity of our waters. So we had a very aggressive program that came into place. It established what the permitting program that our facilities operate under today. It's called the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, NPDES. And those permits were written to make sure the facilities that were discharging could discharge at a level that would protect water quality to meet those fishable, swimmable standards. Well, we didn't have fishable, swimmable standards, so the states had to first establish water quality standards that would achieve fishable, swimmable, and then issue the permits. So how are we going to get 200 municipalities that have very little treatment into compliance with new limits? Well, the Act also established a huge construction grants program, a federal construction grants program that provided 75% funding with a 25% local match for building wastewater treatment facilities. This was strictly for what was called POTWs, publicly owned treatment works. There was an incentive for folks to move forward at that point. There was also a disincentive because the grants program, while it was there, didn't have enough money for everybody all at one time. So we had to establish a priority list. I happened to be working for the Environmental Protection Division at the time. We had to establish a priority list, and facilities basically had to compete for that money, and which was great. We got the big facilities moving fast towards construction, but we also had folks that said, I'm not about to meet your target for getting new treatment in place. If there's a 75% grant waiting for me next year, I'm not going to do it this year. And so we had to put everybody on schedules and say, as long as you're operating your existing facility as well as you can, we're not going to take enforcement action if you're moving towards that grant. And that worked it took us about 10 years longer to get everybody in compliance, but it also provided the finances to help municipalities do that. Our first target was getting reasonable treatment, secondary treatment in place, and advanced treatment where needed. And when the big development boom happened in the early 1970s here in Cobb County, we had package plants at the bottom of every hill. Every subdivision had a little package wastewater treatment plant. And one of the big things we did with the construction grants program was over the course of the next 15 years, ran interceptor sewers out to pick up those plants to get them out of service, because most of those plants went in place in Cobb, Gwinnett, the hotly developing places. They went in place but weren't really operated very well. I actually visited one in Cobb County one time that had a tree growing up through the center well of the plant. So chances are nobody looked at it in a while. But the construction grants program allowed us to move forward and get those facilities out of place. We still to this day are trying to reach that fishable, swimmable on all the waters. But the challenges have changed over the years. Our first target was let's get treatment in place for biological treatment to get rid of the major organic loads. Then we moved towards toxic chemicals and established our first toxic standards in 1989. Today we have standards for 150 or so toxic chemicals in our waters. But back then, we were just starting to deal with those kinds of issues. Today, the fish advisories that we have in place in Georgia primarily are for things like PCBs, chlordane, dioxin, that are found in fish tissue, DDT. Those things have been banned. Most of those things have been banned from use in Georgia and nationwide since the early 70s. But the thing that made them the most attractive back then, the fact that they wouldn't break down, is the thing that we're still trying to deal with today. They don't break down and they get passed down through generations of fish or whatever. So we still see, and they remain in the sediments, and we still see some problems with elevated levels of those things that haven't been actually used in production for years. As we moved through the 90s, we started taking on more and more complex. As we got rid of the easy problems, we started dealing with the complex. In the early to mid-1980s, Georgia did an assessment of state water quality, and we said we didn't have any non-point source problems. Pete's wrong. Those things that he's dealing with didn't exist. Well, we found that they did exist once we got rid of the point sources, but we actually reported we had virtually no non-point source problems in the mid-1980s because they were being masked by the point source problems. That's kind of a good news, bad news thing, but the good news is our municipalities and our industries have done a great job of getting facilities in place over the years and of operating those facilities. We have, I would say, a much more sophisticated operating core today than there was in the 70s. Our facilities require much more sophistication, much more knowledge, much more training, and we've done a great job of putting the people in place to do that. And we've got virtually every discharge, every industry in the state that discharges, every municipality in the state that discharges has facilities in place to meet the standards, and virtually all of them do most of the time. When they don't, they'll hear from Jack, or they'll hear from Russ. And we got a strong EPD, strong Environmental Protection Division enforcement program. The challenges, most of the challenges that we're dealing with today are what Pete described, the non-point sources. I would venture to say the biggest pollutant that we've got in the state of Georgia today is mud. I know you said stormwater runoff, but erosion, just poor management of land and the mud that runs off. And some of our biggest violators are state agencies, unfortunately. Those are the biggest challenges that we face today. And every day we take on new challenges. The standards get tougher. We're now dealing with nutrient standards and tightening those up, which means we're providing more and more protection for our lakes in particular. We're dealing with wetlands and trying to define exactly what constitutes a wetland. But the challenges get tougher. But the fact of the matter is that we've come a long, long way, and today we enjoy, I think, if you go to virtually any corner of this state, you will see water quality that's better than it was 40 years ago, better than it was 30 years ago. We have made tremendous progress. Who would have thought in 1972 that Savannah Harbor would be maybe our biggest tourist attraction in the state of Georgia? Who would have thought that the Chattahoochee River would have a viable fishery below the city of Atlanta? I got very frustrated with one of our gubernatorial candidates this past session who said, I'm standing on the banks of the Chattahoochee River where I grew up in Mableton. I'm not going to name the candidate, I'm disgusted. I used to swim and play and dance in this river, and I want to leave the river the way my parents left it to us. And I'm thinking, either you're a whole lot older than I am, or than I think you are, or a whole lot younger than I think you are. Because when you were a baby, when you were a young boy, the Chattahoochee River below Atlanta was not where you wanted to swim and play. We've made tremendous progress, literally all over the state. You used to be able to drive over the Conasauga River if you go straight up 75 to Dalton. You used to be able to drive across the Conasauga River and know what color carpet they were making that day, because you could look at the Conasauga River and you'd see that color brightly. You don't see that anymore. We've made tremendous improvements all over the state, but there's still challenges, and that's what we're here to talk about today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. But that's my trip through history. I appreciate you taking it with me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff. Yeah, and I wanted to call your attention to 1984, which next year is our anniversary of having fishable and swimmable waters 30 years ago, so we still have some work ahead of us. But in any case, yeah, with all the talk in stormwater, and that's kind of what I do, wanted to ask a couple questions on that. But I always think it's interesting when I go to build a stormwater device, or we get to try to do research on it or design it, something like that, to try to address some of these pollutants. It's pretty interesting to me because as soon as we get the big yellow pieces of equipment out there, it rains and it rains and it rains, and then as soon as we get done with our construction and go to monitor it to see how well it did, it stops raining. So the good news is we can explain to our grantors that we were 100% effective in controlling some of the pollutants of concern. So, but yeah, I wanted to ask the panelists, if we have these issues with stormwater runoff, and obviously our political boundaries don't coincide with some of the watershed boundaries, but really interested in kind of an insider's look on managing these systems in light of NPDES Phase 2 requirements that we have. And I guess obviously there's problems, but also like to hear if there's any nice opportunities now that we have lots of rain again.
I like the way everybody passed this microphone to me when they're talking about stormwater. Well, I think that there are more challenges than most people realize. When you deal with a water system, the purveyor of that water system handles it from the point where it's withdrawn out of the lake, river, reservoir, whatever, all the way to the property owner's house. Same way with the wastewater side. You take it from the property owner's place all the way to the point of discharge, and you have complete control over that. Unfortunately, in the cases of stormwater, you do not. And so the first thing that you have to do is really educate everyone in your community that it is a community-wide problem, not just a localized problem. That's the first thing. The second thing is you've got to make sure that in the counties that both the city and the county are working to the same goal, because one community may be working on a water quality issue and the other part of the community is working on a volume control issue. And so you really need to work together to address those concerns. I can tell you in Douglas County, one of the things that we saw is that we have about 13 stream segments in Douglas County that are on the 303D list, which is the impaired waters list that's published every couple of years. And what we noticed was that there was many of those stream segments were on the impaired waters because of fecal counts in the streams, mainly because of failing septic systems and what have you. And so we've implemented, I think we're the only community in Metro Atlanta that requires septic tank pumping in our watershed, in our drinking water supply watershed. We've implemented buffer requirements to be able to provide some improvement in those stream segments. In fact, our water quality programs predate the state's requirements. And because of that and some sampling, we have managed over the last 15 years to remove 7 of those stream segments. And I think we're the only people in the state that have been able to remove that many stream segments from the impaired waters list. But again, it's a focused approach to the problem. I can tell you this, we have a lot of stormwater complaints in Douglas County, as I imagine they do in every other county. And I can tell you that I've never had one person come into the office and complain about a water quality problem if they lived at the top of the hill, okay? I can almost assure you that if you're living at the bottom of the hill, I want to hear from you. But if you're living at the top of the hill, I never talk to you.
Are there any opportunities that some of the other panelists have seen with stormwater, kind of managing it as a resource perhaps? Or?
The only thing I could probably add is we actually invested over the last few years about $1 million in an Upper Etowah watershed study. It was started by the Corps and some others. Cobb's been involved with us along with Bartow and other counties. What we tried to do was approach it holistically from a watershed standpoint. And questions asked, well, why did the Water Authority, who's all about, trying to make our money for our customers to the highest use, why would you invest in that? Well, we can institute things in Cherokee County as far as stormwater management, and county passes the right regs, which they have, and they're enforced the way they should be. We've got quite a few counties when you look at that map that are above us, all the way up to Dahlonega. If they don't take the same efforts we do, kind of what we do is kind of not, because here it comes down the river right on top of us. We're at the foot of the hill, as you say. With that, we was able to make some common ground with our neighbors. It's been the biggest struggle, and I think that will be going forward. For when you look at water quality, these boundary issues are going to be one of the biggest struggles we face. And as politicians and others in the industry, that's the hurdle we've got to get beyond. It goes back to what we was talking about earlier. It does affect all of us, because it will come back to haunt you at some point. Even if you're on top of the hill, it's going to catch up to you at some point. That, I guess, is the biggest thing, is that look at it holistically as far as a watershed. Anything you do, it affects everybody else. And to implement these rules on a regional basis is going to be the key, and I think that's where our water districts are going to be so important across the state going forward.
I'd like to make one more comment, too, because, all too often we receive these regulations or model ordinances from the district, and all the communities are required to adopt them and implement them. But when you talked about opportunities, one of the things that has happened because of the district requirements is that all the communities are required to reevaluate their flood maps and update them. I mean, the flood maps in Douglas County were done in 1978, and I think somebody just sat down at a desk and kind of drew around a contour line and said that was it. And what we're seeing now, for example, our houses being flooded. When we had the floods in 2009, I know Cobb County was hit very hard. A lot of communities were hit very hard, including Douglas County. And so we have updated those floodplain maps to prevent that continued problem of people building in the floodplain or even in the future floodplain. And so that is an opportunity that's presented itself through the years that all the communities are taking advantage of, and I believe most communities have to have that done by 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So that's an opportunity that's come about because of the regulations that have been precipitated through the district.
I'll say something that may be a fairly obvious point, but erosion and sediment control complaints and issues are the #1 complaint that EPD deals with. And currently, as I guess construction is starting to pick back up and rain has been falling all year, we've certainly seen an increased number of complaints and have to respond to that. But I think that these two gentlemen made a great point in talking about, from a watershed planning perspective, about stormwater flows across different boundaries that may or may not exist, not existing from a watershed standpoint. But as we've looked at regional water planning and we've increased that, and we have the 10 water plans in addition to the regional Metro North Georgia Water Planning District, that communication between upstream and downstream neighbors has improved, and I think that's a great thing for the state. The Metro North Georgia Water Planning District has set the bar pretty high with the 3 ways they're looking at things with water, wastewater, and stormwater. And as far as water planning goes with what we're doing, when we're setting TMDLs or lake limits, we're looking at stormwater as a major component of that. When we're looking at existing land use that flows into these bodies of water, as well as future land use and how to plan for that. But water quality and water quantity cannot be taken away from each other. They're absolutely interrelated and have to be accounted for as far as our planning for growth.
Very good. Yeah, that's interesting to see all the different perspectives for stormwater. One of the things that we wrestle with in the classroom and studio is trying to get people to realize that stormwater is a resource and there are opportunities to, highlight that and bring that visible. We so often want to push that away and get it into our streams and out of sight, out of mind quickly. But there are some opportunities with these new regs to bring that in for I guess people to visualize a little bit more. So well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something close to here. That's the Hickory Log Reservoir, and see what opportunities we can reveal with this. But if somebody wanted to give us an update on that.
Okay. For the last 2 decades, reservoirs have been opportunities that have been discussed. I think Mayor Austin was mentioning we talk about it when we're in a drought, and we let it go when we're getting a lot of rain. And questions have come up, particularly for the sake of our legislative member here today. What can the state do to accelerate? My answer is not much. The holdup in permitting, the holdup in construction of a reservoir for water supply is primarily at the federal level. Our state has been very helpful, very creative in helping communities. The change in focus at GFA has been instrumental for communities to have resources to go forward with reservoir development plans. We have a system at the Corps of Engineers that's broken. Their policies are archaic. You can probably tell I have an opinion. And even the chief counsel of the Corps has said to me personally, we have a system that does not take into consideration what we know about science that has been developed in the last 30 or 40 years, and it needs to change. But that's the way that our federal bureaucracy works. Hickory Log Creek, we began construction, or we applied for a permit there in 2000. We received that permit in 2005. That is lightning speed. The reason we were able to get it so quickly is that there was already an impoundment of the stream where we were building the reservoir. We were moving the impoundment, but the primary environmental impacts had already occurred. We still had to mitigate significantly for stream impacts, threatened and endangered species impacts, and wetlands impacts. Which is all federal regulation. We were able to work through that, but we started construction in 2006. We completed the dam in 2007, and the reservoir was filled in 2010, primarily because of the rains that we received in 2009. The reservoir elevation raised about 20 feet in one day. But all along, the state has been very helpful in that process. Where we are today with Hickory Log Creek is the concept of that reservoir. It's a pumped storage. We take water from the Etowah River, we pump it, we hold it in our savings account at the top of the hill. And then when we need water for our customers, the concept was that we take that water back out at Lake Allatoona, which is downstream of Hickory Log Creek. We release water back into the Etowah River. It flows into Allatoona Lake, and we withdraw it. Well, the Corps hasn't told us that we can do that, that they'll let us put water back into the Etowah River, but then it becomes waters of the state again, and it goes into Allatoona for the Corps to manage, and we don't get credit for it, even though we've invested $100 million in creating a structure to operate for the benefit of the people that have invested in it. I was in Washington with Catherine 3 weeks ago, and we met with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works for Policy and Legislation. That's longer than Cobb County Marietta Water Authority to say. And it makes sense to everybody there, but because of how policy is approached by the Corps, they just don't shift unless they are made to shift through a lawsuit or through a congressional order to change. So here we are today. We have a $100 million investment. It works. We could release water and take water if we needed it today. There's nothing that would keep us from doing that, and we have full state authority to do that. We have 2 levels of permits here, and the state permit deals with the allocation of water. The federal permits deal with the management of dredging and filling in a waterway from the 404 permit perspective. But for us, it's also the contract status that we have of the storage we own in Lake Allatoona and how the water is managed through that. We have everything worked out with the state. We have virtually nothing worked out with the federal government, although we've been actively pursuing the conversation since 2000. So that may have clouded your ideas of what's going up there more than helped. It's just a very difficult situation we find ourselves in related to federal bureaucracy. Yeah, our option, if the Corps does not allow us to simply release water into the river and carry that water to Allatoona, let the natural system carry it to Allatoona for us to pump. We've estimated a $208 million investment for a pump station, pipeline, and storage at our water treatment plant in Ackworth. In addition to that, we would be blending a river water and a lake water at that plant to treat rather than pulling it all out of Lake Allatoona. So we would have some treatment concerns. It could increase the cost of treatment. The investment required for that, or the customer cost of that $208 million over 30 years is a 17% increase in water rates. It would cost us roughly 7 cents per 1,000 gallons to pump that water, and in addition to that, imagine the carbon footprint over time, and that is it's an issue that is very strongly looked at in Washington, D.C., and that may be the one issue that gets traction, is carbon footprint, not the environmental cost related to the carbon footprint may be what pushes us over the top to allow us to operate it as it was designed.
Surely that's generated the need for some more questions from the audience. Does anybody have a question?
Is this something that could have been controlled at a local level through more regulation of, is this an IBT for one thing, and if not, how could we have done more to prevent this delay at the national level from happening, and what can we learn from this as we prepare to build other reservoirs that impact the metro region? Sorry, I already said my name earlier.
It does not contribute, well, it does contribute to an existing interbasin transfer, but it would not necessarily increase that transfer as it exists. We do plan on increasing withdrawals from both basins, ACT and the ACF, and our trend over the last 10 to 15 years has reduced the interbasin transfer that exists from the Coosa, the ACT basin, to the Chattahoochee basin. What could be done? What happened is that there's always challenges to getting a permit approved for a reservoir construction. And our concept was discussed in the preliminary phases of releasing water back into the Etowah River. And if you look at the record that is produced and kept by the Corps of the discussions that occurred, the questions, the public comments that came forward during the permitting process, the Corps said, we don't see a reason that this wouldn't work, but we've never really permitted one that way before. And then we saw the beauty of having a Savannah district of the Corps of Engineers that's responsible for the permitting of a reservoir, and the Mobile district of the Corps of Engineers that is responsible for managing the river basin that reservoir sits in. And so the Savannah district put a special condition in our permit that says, before you put all this into operation, you need to work this out with the Mobile district. And so as we were building, and then they issued us a permit with a 5-year time limit to build the project. So we jump into building the project, and we continue to have this discussion with the Mobile district all along. Every step along the way, we're coordinating, we're doing what is required in that special condition of the permit. And then we get to the end, and we ask for permission to use it, and they said, well, we can't really let you do that because we don't have a policy that allows you to do that. We don't have a policy that would prohibit you from doing it, but we don't have a policy that would let you. And I have a letter that says that from the chief of engineers. And so when I have met with the chief people at the Mobile district and said, you know, I can pick up the phone today, and we were in the middle of the drought before the rain started when Catherine came to work last October. We were meeting in Mobile, and we were getting these nasty letters from the Corps saying, cut back your withdrawals from Allatoona. Cut back your withdrawals from Allatoona. You're overdrawing your storage account. And I picked up my phone, and I said, I can make a phone call right now, and we can replenish our storage account. And the response from the Corps attorney in the room was, please don't do that, because we don't know what we would do with you if you did. So they're in a quandary as to how to deal with it. Hopefully we're going to, maybe Congressman Graves can help us out, and I'm sure he's very successful with the Corps. I'm hopeful we're going to get this resolved within a year or so before we have another drought cycle so that we can use it. But I don't know that anything could have happened before now based on how the timeline went in pursuing the reservoir permit, getting the permit, having a time limit on getting it built, and then not having all those other things addressed because of the slowness of the Corps to address issues. That is the key. Senator Shelby sits on the Senate Appropriations Committee that governs the money that flows into the Corps. And he held up the appointment of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works until he got her to agree that she would not do anything to assist Georgia in acquiring additional water or being able to have access to additional water for continued growth in Georgia. And so since she has been the Assistant Secretary, there has been no movement on return flows. There's been no movement on Hickory Log Creek. And even the point that she directed the Corps' rewrite of the ACT water control manuals to not include future water supply, which, in our opinion, was illegal because it does not pass the NEPA requirement that all alternatives are evaluated. So we're going to have a new water control manual for the ACT basin come out in December that does not even consider the existing water uses in the basin, much less what's needed in the future.
Any other points or comments on that? So the question was, is there a legal remedy?
Related to the ACT manual? Or yes, and those are being discussed.
Very good. Well, let's, I guess, thinking about some of the permitting, I guess given that it takes 10 to 15 years or so to permit, construct a water supply reservoir, definitely not a quick process, and a water treatment facility associated with it. I wondered if some of the panelists could address any issues with the current regulatory, I guess, EPD plan review process that could potentially be streamlined or not.
One of the things we found is that EPD was up until very recently, you tend to do things the way you've always done them. And we started wondering, why do we need EPD to be reviewing plans and specs for water and wastewater systems when for municipal facilities, when on the industrial side, they treat it basically as a black box. Whatever comes out of the plant, that's what they're worried about. They look at the end result and make sure that the discharge meets the permit. And how they get there is the responsibility of the owner and their engineers. And as we looked into it, the main thing we discovered is that the program that was put in place as far as review of plans and specs for wastewater treatment plants was put in largely because of the construction grants program that I mentioned earlier. We had a 75% federal investment, and so we had, supposedly to protect the federal dollars, we had a huge staff of people and reviewed to the nth degree facility reports, design development reports, engineering plans and specs, and in a lot of cases had people that were fairly junior engineers reviewing plans and specs prepared by some of the most prominent consulting firms in the world. And as we looked at it together with EPD, we decided, you know, this is not really necessary. We can put our resources at EPD to better use by requiring a certification from the engineer and really putting the monkey back on the engineer's back to be responsible for that design, to make sure that when they submit plans and specs, they're certifying, and they put a lot of qualifiers on it if it's properly operated and all this, but that this facility will meet the limits. And in doing so, helped free up some resources for EPD to put in other places. And our hope was that they would put them on the front end to help with, you know, getting projects moving forward, getting permits issued, waste load allocations, that kind of thing, and also to have resources available at the end of the project for enforcement. And that's one of the things. EPD is sorely underfunded, and we need to be sure if you can't have environmental protection at the expense of the economy, but neither can you have economic growth at the expense of the environment, and we need a strong environmental protection program. So I'm going to throw my plug in for, you know, we really need to fund the Environmental Protection Division to do the things they need to do. But in the meantime, they've got to make the best use they can of their resources. And I think Judd Turner, our EPD director, and Russ, and Jack has just been in the saddle for a short period of time, but I think they've done a great job of being open to the idea of how can we make the best use of our resources and put some of the burden back on for accountability, put some burden back on the owners and their engineers. And so I'll let Russ talk a little bit about the things they've done.
Thank you, Jack. And I have to give you kudos as well as ACEC for the work that has been done to where we are today, as far as putting some of the liabilities back on the engineers that submit plans and specifications. And as we kind of shifted our folks, I mean, I guess 10 years ago we had our engineering and technical services group that pretty much reviewed all the plans and specs for all the facilities in the state, which that group really doesn't exist anymore. And I was having a conversation on the way out here today as to how it works, and it's got this quasi-regulatory group that does some plan and spec review, particularly for state-funded projects or federally funded projects, which we have to maintain a review process with, as well as active participation through construction as well. But you know, we were also tasked with a bill that was, I guess, a couple of years ago now for tasking the entire agency with expedited permitting. And Jack actually is the one that we really should point to on this through his experience with the air branch. Jack was the air branch chief up until, I guess, 3 months ago now. And as part of the air branch, air and water are two different animals, first of all. And air has somewhat of a protected source of fees. So if there's a permit fee, then the air branch gets to keep that fee. And water is not necessarily the same case, nor is land. But with that source of revenue, Jack laid out a very good, I guess, a backbone for all the other branches to look at, and it was a great goal for the entire agency. But it's not only, it provides an expedited process. If you so choose to pay that extra amount for an expedited permit review, you can. But it also has a transparency component, and you can go online and see exactly where your permit application process is the entire way through. I think that's a great goal for water. However, water is a different animal in its own at EPD, and there's so many different components. You got water facilities, wastewater facilities, buffer applications. You know, is the whole erosion sediment control process. There's safe dams. There's so many different reviews in so many different parts of the state, and it's all, you know, we're intertwined with federal agencies as part of some of that review as well. But we certainly have a lot of room to improve, but I do think we're starting to get some of the pieces put together. I mean, with what's being done as far as freeing up some of our folks so we don't have to look at every single facility. That was a great start. Getting Jack in with the experience of already attacking some of the expedited permitting processes before, that's another great start. And it's something we continue to look at. And I had conversations this week even about different areas to look at with safe dams, which is it's an underfunded program historically that's just it's a huge liability for the state, and you know, you got half the people trying to keep up with permit reviews, and those same group of people are trying to go out and do inspection of facilities. It's just a good example for just reevaluating where we are and how we can improve.
Comments? Well, very good. Well, given some of the issues surrounding reservoir construction, operation, some other things, and given that that's the only thing, or this next topic is the only thing between us and lunch, wanted to go through and ask a few of the panelists we have not heard from before, maybe to make some comments on the Water Stewardship Act and whether conservation measures might be implemented to, I guess, reach out and try to reduce some of our needs for additional reservoirs. I'd like to, I guess, hear from Ms. Zitch and a couple other people might have some comments on that too. Thanks.
Thanks. You've heard over the course of this a couple times about conservation practices that the Metro Water District has put into place. And I'm going to tie this back to water wars, because one of the best things the district has done over the last 13 years, 12 years, is to get these conservation measures in place and implemented by the 15 counties across the district. And that in turn has shown that our per capita water demand has gone down by 20%. So how many people in this room read that Metro Atlanta is killing the oysters in Apalachicola Bay in the newspapers in the last month, 2 months, whatever? And just as another question, how many people read the headline that Georgia's water use is going to grow double by 2020? Anybody see that one? It hit the trailer on the Today Show. Both of those things are false and not commenting on the one journalist in the room. There is a point of, you know, you need to check the facts that back up some of these stories. So if we talk water conservation, Metro Atlanta's put into place these water conservation requirements, which, by the way, is to the cost of our utilities, because they are in the quote-unquote business of selling water. So everything they don't sell hits their revenue and hits their ability to fund the capital costs that they already have in the ground. We have decreased our water use by over 20% on a per capita basis. What we use in Metro Atlanta is only 2 to 3% of the entire water flowing in the Apalachicola-Chattahoochee-Flint system, even in a very dry year, which means the water that we use today doesn't affect the oyster population in Apalachicola Bay. What in fact is affecting the oyster population has affected all of us, in that it's been severe drought over the course of the last decade. And I can talk oysters like to no end. For Georgia, by the way, that same article that said Georgia's water use was going to grow twofold by 2020 said Metro Atlanta's water use was going to grow ninefold by 2020, which would mean the entire state of California is going to pick up and move to the Metro Atlanta area in the next 7 years. For those of you that are pro-development, one might say, you know, hoorah, but boy, would that scare the heck out of me from an infrastructure standpoint. That piece, the 2020 piece, was just erroneous data that was done by an engineering firm to drum up business in the state of Georgia that unfortunately got some of us so riled up that it's just a poor way to drum up business by getting headlines on the Today Show that are matter-of-factly false. Conservation, though, getting back to the original question, conservation is an important piece for Metro Atlanta. And when I say Metro Atlanta, I mean the 15 counties and even the surrounding region. It is something that we should be doing because we are part of a bigger system, because we do need to be wise stewards of our water, and we do need to be looking at how we can promote good usage of the water that flows through our system. We are very limited in our supply. We were built on transportation hubs and not water hubs, so 99% of our supply comes from surface water, and we are a uniquely positioned city when it comes to that there is not the water supply necessarily here naturally, which is why we have these big reservoirs that help with our water supply. Conservation, however, cannot be the ultimate solution to Metro Atlanta and Metro Atlanta's growth. It is a piece of the solution, but in addition, we need to be able to use our reservoirs in our own backyards, Lake Lanier and Lake Allatoona. We need to be looking at additional sources of storage. We need to be looking at integrated water resource management. So we talked earlier about stormwater. We need to be looking at managing stormwater, not just from a stormwater perspective, but in how the whole cycle works, from stormwater, wastewater, water, and the cycle of that. And that's one of the things that you'll see the Metro District working at in our next plan update, which is due in 2016, is how to manage the water resources and what falls in our area. We do planning for the water in the area, and we do have plenty of supply to carry us through the future, but it's a combination of both water conservation and keeping that moving forward and making sure that we're planning for the future, for the 45 million people that are going to move here in the next 9 years, 6.5 years.
Any other comments?
Before we adjourn, there's one topic that we really have kind of whispered but really haven't talked about. That's interbasin transfer, and I'm glad to hear that Glenn is the poster child for interbasin transfer, because I felt like I have been for a while. But interbasin transfer is just one more tool in our toolbox for taking care of our water quality, our water supply problems. It's not a necessary evil; it's a necessary tool. Atlanta sits where Atlanta sits not because of water resources. We've got a relatively tiny stream that we rely on for our major water supply, for a community that is way too large to sit where it sits if you're looking at it strictly from a natural resources, natural, every drop of water where it started. We move water around from time to time in order to meet our needs. Moving Atlanta is kind of out of the question, I think. If we wanted to move it, we'd probably move it to Hawkinsville, but I don't think that would serve the needs of the state very well. But Atlanta sits on a major subcontinental ridge. If you look at Peachtree Street, if a drop of rain falls on one side of Peachtree Street, it's going to go to the Atlantic Ocean. If it falls on the other side, it's going to go to the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, if you were to go to dinner at Merrimack's and have 3 or 4 glasses of sweet tea and go across the street to a play at the Fox, you're probably going to participate in an interbasin transfer at some time during the course of the night. But we can't have regional solutions without interbasin transfers. 102, is that right, Mayor? 102 of our 159 counties are divided by basins. They have more than one river basin. The idea of interconnecting our systems so that we can protect ourselves from drought or natural or man-made disaster would be impossible without including in that concept interbasin transfer. Regional solutions of any kind would be impossible if we try to hold every drop of water in the basin that it originates in. So, and I throw that out just so that, because every year there's a bill introduced to prohibit interbasin transfers. And if you want to bring Georgia's any kind of economic growth to a screeching halt, that would be a good way to start. So just throw that out for background.
Jack, I think you have a good point. Steve and Glenn both there. 5 years ago, we had to amend the district plan to allow Cobb Marietta Water to sell to Douglas County when they had issues at the Dog River Reservoir. And that's basic human life needs, way outside of anything else, economic development. It was a function where they were about out of water. And we had to amend quickly to allow that to happen. So interbasin transfers serve that need, that interconnectivity. And like you said, we also have the current plan in effect for planning for a natural or a man-made disaster, that water gets to the communities where people have to have it for the basic functions.
And I guess I direct my comment to our legislative representative here today. We have had bills that have come very close to passing, which would have either eliminated interbasin transfers or severely restricting them. Both of those would be so detrimental, and the cost to overcome. From a historical perspective, Cobb County developed primarily on the east side early, East Cobb. And our water supply was split pretty evenly between East Cobb from the Chattahoochee River and West Cobb from Lake Allatoona. But when we developed our wastewater systems, we put the plants where the people were because it flows downhill. We weren't going to pump it over the ridge. So the discharges, the primary discharges in Cobb County are into the Chattahoochee River. There's another reason for that. The Chattahoochee River has much more assimilative capacity to accept those wastewater discharges than the Coosa does. You can't change the history of how things develop. And you also can't change the assimilative capacity of a river. So the tool of interbasin transfer, not just between counties, but within a county, is important when 102 of those counties have an interbasin transfer. It's very important that the people at EPD, that the state has hired that are professionals in the water arena, retain our trust, because they're the ones who have the capabilities of studying these issues and making decisions. They are given a huge responsibility of managing the resources of the state. When the legislative body steps into the process, usually for a local issue, trying to clean up a local issue, and it can affect everyone and take away the ability of our scientists, our professionals in our regulatory branch from doing their job to manage for everyone in the state. It puts us in a very dangerous place. And so for whatever that's worth, thank you.
Well, to that end, I wondered if the panelists would address, I guess, the thoughts about regional planning initiatives and where if we need to think about interbasin transfers, where might the sources be, and then I guess what are some of the planning initiatives with that, and who's going to pay for it?
Well, I actually think the discussion so far has led up to a pretty good pointing of saying regional planning is a positive thing for the state. The Metro North Georgia Water Planning District was created in the early 2000s, and then the other 10 water planning councils were created later on that decade. So we've actually seen some more development out of the Metro District, and I think going back a couple of questions ago to conservation and the results thereof are, everybody in this room should pat themselves on the back for the success for Metro Atlanta and the water that immediately can be pointed to that's saved from surface waters, and as far as the conservation efforts that the Metro region has gone through. I think the other parts of the state have not been as successful, but they're getting there. As they're starting to see the drivers that Metro Atlanta has, and drought has certainly put them on the forefront, they're getting there, and they're starting to implement the same standards that Metro Atlanta has. Going back to the stormwater discussions where we're talking about upstream neighbors and downstream neighbors, I'll point at the city of Valdosta. They've got a drainage area of about 1,500 square miles, and they've seen severe flooding problems that they've never seen before, and it's because of what neighbors, other counties and cities have done or not done to help out with the flooding problems. Well, actually, everybody tends to be pretty passionate about water, and it brings everybody to the table to talk about it. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not good. But as far as these planning districts and councils that have been formed, it's putting everybody in the same table, in the same room, forcing the conversation to happen. They're working together to put a plan together. They're voting on that plan. They're actively adopting it. If the adoption of the plans gets tied with permitting, such as the case with the Metro District, and permits coincide with the plan, I mean, that's another layer of quality control going into the process. For instance, when you want to go to an interbasin transfer in a time of need that doesn't match the plan, well, it's going through a couple of different levels. I think all of this effort, whether it's regional planning or just simple communication from utility to utility or municipality to municipality, it's a positive thing for our industry as a whole. And the more support that we can get behind that, whether that's state dollars through a legislative process, which was the case with the Metro District as well as the 10 water councils this past year, or whether it's using state revolving funds that are passed downs from federal funds with drinking water or whatnot, it's all a positive for the state, and it's not something that we can put a plan together and let it sit on a shelf and collect dust. It's something that we've got to continuously maintain the communication between all these different organizations. So I guess I can sum that up by saying I'd have a hard time finding anyone that does not believe that regional water planning is a positive for the state.
Okay, so in full disclosure mode, I work for a regional planning agency. So you will not be surprised to hear me say I am in support of regional water planning. But if you look at the map that we handed out, metropolitan Atlanta sits either at the headwaters or near the headwaters of 6 water basins. And so what we do from a regional water planning perspective is look at how all of these utilities and counties and cities and the citizens and businesses that operate here get their water supply, but also how we interact with those around us. And if we weren't looking at that from a regional perspective, we would be hard to push any planning forward or any progress forward on water, wastewater, stormwater, and water conservation is the positive story there. And if you take that and then put on top of it water disputes with our neighbors, without that regional aspect of it, if Cobb County had to go out and defend themselves against Florida and Alabama, we would be much more challenged than knowing that together as a region we are working towards a common good and also can defend ourselves against what comes from the other states. Now within Georgia, we're starting that dynamic in discussing those water basins across the other councils. So making sure that the Metro Water District is discussing with these other 10 councils what's going on, because it's not just a Florida, Alabama, Georgia, or a Georgia, South Carolina, or a Georgia, Tennessee issue. There's also, we need to look at how we share our resources within the state, and that's an important piece of what we need to do moving forward.
Very good. Well, we're getting close to lunch, so I'll just wrap up with a couple closing comments. That it appears that there are some regional planning efforts that have done some good things. There's lots of challenges and opportunities, and we realize how interconnected we are, and water's an organizing element, as John T. Lyle used to say. So we have lots of opportunities. So I'd like to thank the panelists for their opportunities to address us. All right. And then I'd like to turn it back over to Pam real quick.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Dr. John Calabria as well for moderating and inviting questions. And appreciate your interest as well. And we are going to have lunch, but before we do that, I would like to again thank our sponsors very much for helping us put this together today. And Don, do you have any, I'd love to have a comment from you about what you heard today at ACC. It's not what you do every day, so I'd love to hear what you.
First of all, thank you, Pam. Thank you, Jack, for hosting us today. A great facility. I've been in this area for a long time, but have not been here. Wonderful facility, and thank you for serving as our host today. In my role with AT&T and my role with the Paulding Chamber, I sit on the board of the Regional Business Coalition, and so I appreciate Terry's leadership on issues such as this one, particularly for people like me who are not water experts. This is an important topic, an important issue. I think from the chamber perspective, we've had a legislative agenda item on water every year that I can remember, particularly focused on the Richland Creek Reservoir. So appreciate folks like the mayor, his leadership, Mike Jones, and the county's leadership on that issue. But this is an important topic and one that many folks need to be aware of. So we're glad to be a sponsor of this symposium and all the symposiums around the region. Thanks.
Nothing, Pam, except, again, thank you all for taking time to come here. The Regional Business Coalition is the association of the 16 largest and most active chambers of commerce in the metropolitan Atlanta area. You've got a handout there that gives you some contacts for you to call about water issues, but I also want to offer your local Chamber of Commerce as also a resource for those if you have issues about economic development. We have a board of directors that Don is on and quite a few others. So please, again, talk to your president of your Chamber of Commerce if you have any questions. We do have 2 more conferences. I think, Pam, you mentioned earlier. We're going to have one at DeKalb Tech and one at the Henry County Chamber of Commerce later on next month. So again, everyone is welcome to attend those and ask questions. And we've got lunch served right next door. Our panelists are going to be around for a while, so if you have any specific questions about your local area, again, please talk to them directly. And again, thank our elected officials who've taken time out of your busy day to come here and learn about the stuff. And again, please feel free to always call us as a resource as you try to make policies that affect water within your communities. Pam, again, thank you for hosting us.